Manny, where are you at?
Yeah, I live out in I'm in near Toronto, Canada. I live in Brampton, actually, Brampton, Ontario. I grew up in the city of Toronto, so I'm in Canada, the great
Oh,
white north.
right on.
I always thought
It's
Canada was a fictitious place.
yeah. Seems to be, but I'll tell you what, this winter has been a little bit of an anomaly. Today we had 13 degrees Celsius. It's like a spring day here. It's been a warmer than usual winter, put it that way. It's unusual. Yet a week ago, we actually had our Canadian club Giant Runt show, and it was freezing. It was really cold. So now it rained today. We actually got rain. We got a little bit of hail. The weather's just up and down. It's throwing the birds off like crazy, though. I'll tell you that.
Oh, that's fun. So you probably
Yeah.
haven't started breeding season then?
No, not yet, because I don't pair up until like March or April. I usually what I rule of thumb, I wait till we start getting the weather plus freezing. My birds are here where I live. I live right on the border of the Halton Hills, which it's really cold over there. We usually, or what I usually do is I wait till, I start getting a little bit of the plus temperatures, and that's when I start putting the birds together. I used to try earlier, but there's no point. You end up losing half of them in the nest when they freeze up.
Yeah.
It gets really challenging. So it's usually end of March or April for me.
Do you have open bottom floors on those lofts? I mean, with temperatures like that, or all your lofts pretty sealed up, are they?
Yeah, but, well, so I got two main coops. I've got my where I have all my giant run breeders, and the coop is built about a foot and a half off the ground. The interior loft is plywood, but I put in the wintertime I've got about 6 to 8 inches of deep litter in it. It's good for maintaining it because first of all, it's pretty hard to pick through or when to clean them up when it's frozen. It's pretty bad. So I put deep litter, but my fly pens are all above ground, wire bottoms. But I'm right on the hill, so it basically I get a lot of the westerly winds blowing and the northerlies, and I'm telling you, a lot of my friends will tell you you can't stay more than 5 or 10 minutes out there. It's really cold. It gets really cold. But the birds don't mind it. Usually, they on a day like today they start strutting and they're ready to go. I was actually up there this morning and I could see that they're already going in the deep litter. They're trying to carve, the hens are trying to carve out places to nest.
Oh,
So I got to
nest
get
areas.
going.
Nice.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
yeah.
good, man. And you've always had giant runts, huh? That's been your breed.
Yeah, I've had a couple of others over the years. The first breed I had when I was a kid was actually Pomeranian powders, and I had what we call a breed you don't see a lot of nowadays. It's the giant American crests. I had those for a while, but my father, he had pigeons back in Portugal in the Azores, and he had giant runts, or they call them the Romanian runts over there. When he came, to Canada, he got pigeons here, and we had those. We had Pomeranians, we had crests, and we had just homers, just for as a hobby, just to keep the birds. But then when we started seeing a lot of the runts that they had here in North America, we got into them, and that became pretty much my primary breed, and that's all we stuck to over the years, and it's basically what I'm focused on now. I have just primarily giant runts, and I have utility kings, and I use them as feeders for the giant runts. They parent the babies and they do the brooding and all of that for me.
How do you make a giant runt?
Yeah, it's the American giant runt. A lot of history behind that breed, to be honest with you. It started off as, if you go by the Book of Levi, the Roman banquet pigeon, which is basically just a large utility breed that was bred primarily for meat for or on the table. So it was more of a use for food than anything else. And I think a lot of utility breeds started that way, like the Mondanes and Kings and other larger breeds were all primarily just bred for size. So that's the way it always was in Europe, and it's still, and to some extent today, it's still the same way. if you look at the Romano Club, they're more focused on a bird that's more longer, and it's more for size than actual features. Whereas the American Giant Runts that we breed today, we're trying to get more show type features, such as the shorter beak, the wider heads, nice wider chests, and thicker necks. And we want higher shoulders in a bird that stands at least close to a 45-degree back angle. Something that was has a little more appeal to the judges, right? The breed primarily was created by a fella named Eric Beery. He was the first guy that was really interested in trying to take the older style of runts and make them more modernized into a show type of bird. And he did that by crossing other breeds, primarily the tumbler, the long face, clean leg tumbler. When he did that, he created a bird with a much prettier face, but it also had like other faults that you had to outcross, right? You needed thicker, wider legs, and you wanted to get the size on them, because that's the biggest attribute is the size. They continued down that path for several years. I think the first time the standard was modified was probably in the 50s. I have a picture actually somewhere of the original sketch, that when they started to try to create the bird into what we have today. And then in the 80s, it was modified again to more of a bigger headed pigeon, keeping the chest and the size, and trying to get uniformity across the whole pigeon, but primarily focusing on the facial features, trying to get that short beak, nice round eye, good top skull and back skull. When he started doing a lot of his work, of course, unfortunately, over time, a lot of the older breeders that were really dedicated passed away. But in 2003 and 2004 is when the standard was modified last, and it was rewritten by probably the greatest runt breeder that ever lived, John Delahousie. And he was instrumental in creating the bird to be not only just have the facial features, but he also wanted the big round chest. He wanted it to have very thick, powerful legs. He wanted to go back to having them as big as you possibly can, with no limit on size, but to have them bring out those features that would be prominent in a lot of the other show breeds. Because let's face it, back then, usually when you went to any of the N.P.A nationals, the runts were one of the first breeds that they would toss out, because it just wasn't appealing to the judges. So it was one of the first breeds that were usually tossed out of the parade. So they're trying to get a little more appeal by changing the standard and making a few modifications on it.
Hello and welcome to the All About Pigeons podcast. I'm Phil.
And I'm Chris.
And today we have with us Manny DeMedeiros. He is a National Pigeon Association master breeder and a master judge of the Giant Runt breed. Manny, thanks for coming on and talking with us today.
Thank you.
You had mentioned there's tumbler in the Giant Runt?
Yeah. One of the early breeds that was crossed into the American Giant Runt was a tumbler cross that was created by Mr. Eric Beery back in the 60s and late 50s and 60s. And this was to kind of enhance the features of the Giant Runt. A lot of the older type runts were the imported English and Romanian runts that were being shipped to America at the time. And they wanted to kind of create a breed, just like they did with a lot of the other utility breeds, right? They wanted to more modernize it to more of a show type of a bird. So by introducing the tumbler bloodline into it, they started enhancing the features. They trying to get the beaks a little bit shorter and wider, a little more pleasing face, a little more top skull over the head, as well as back skull, and to get the bird to stand a little bit more upright. And that's one thing that you notice on the long face clean leg tumblers is they have nice stations on them, right? They got that 45-degree back angle, and when they did that, they improved a lot of those features. But at the same time, the challenge has been to try to do all this, but maintain the size of the pigeon overall, you know.
So it was a meat bird, like a king and everything else was.
Oh,
does that make it pretty prolific? I mean, does it take care of its young good and breed 12 months out of the year if given the right conditions?
It depends, right? Like I do have some of my birds will actually they will nest and they will, they'll nest, they'll lay, they'll brood the eggs, they'll feed the babies right until they're adults. Some of my larger hens are a little bit more clumsier, but in order to maintain, numbers and make sure that I'm doing what I can to try to save as many babies as I can, I use utility kings to foster the babies.
Okay.
So I don't even give them the opportunity, but I do at the end of the year sometimes allow them to either raise their own clutch of eggs, or what I'll do is I'll put some of the eggs from the kings, which for whatever reason, when you put king eggs under a runt, they hatch out perfectly well, they feed them well, everything works perfectly. If you left their own eggs under there, sometimes they crack or they break. But yeah, it really depends. Some of them have been known to break eggs because of their size.
Yeah.
It's always a challenge and something that I'm not willing sometimes to go through. So to play it safe, I just take the eggs, stick them under the kings.
Oh, okay.
Towards the end of the season, I'll let them raise a clutch or so.
Right on. Yeah, I saw you had kings there. I saw on your Facebook post. I don't know if you were using those for crossing into the runts to get different features out, or if they were fosters for you. So, okay.
Yeah, they're foster parents primarily. Yeah, they do a very good job. I tell you, utility kings is the best breed that I've experimented with. I've had utility kings raise 3 or 4 runt babies. They do a really good job feeding, as long as they got good feed in front of them and they're in a good environment. They'll raise the babies pretty well. Very dependable.
Chris is over here playing with pigeons right now.
Oh yeah.
That was my horseman.
Oh, you got horseman powders?
Yeah, I finally have a baby after I think I got these birds in July 4th. Now I'm just finally got the first round.
Oh yeah, I had Pomeranian powders before I had runts actually when I was a child. That was one of my first breeds.
Do they fly?
Yeah, we had an open loft, and they would fly usually to try to get right to the top. And I had American crests. The runts are different though. And I tell people that are trying to express an interest in runts, if you've got an open loft environment, just let them nest on the floor. You let the hens go build their nest in a corner, and they'll do fine. When you're trying to, mass produce them or try to get more, that's usually when things don't go as well.
Yeah, I have a bunch of homers that are that way. Build them all kinds of nests. You set them up. This is great. They lay an egg on the ground.
I got that going on right now in my breeder loft. I think I got 3 pairs on the ground and probably 8 empty nest bowls. So it works. I know some people don't like that, but I've never really ran into any issues with it. If your loft is airtight and everything else, and you got ventilation where you need it, it's not too much of an issue.
Yes.
When it comes to giant runts, and conditioning a bird for a show is different to every breed. What goes into conditioning a giant runt for getting it show ready?
They're a larger pigeon, so they've got, most breeds it's diet primarily, but ventilation and breaking them up. If you're going to show in the fall, you definitely don't want the birds breeding too late into the season. So I try to break them up end of July, early August. That will give them enough time to kind of go through a proper molt and to get themselves into top show condition. So diet's important. Start adding more oil seed and proteins and things like that. Because they're not a very heavy flying breed, and we want a bird to be a little bit more massive. When you get into the colder months, it's an advantage to have a little bit more protein in their diet, so they're a little more heavier. Pretty much the same like with the other breeds. Ventilation, sunlight is the key. Get them away from the stress of breeding. Just take care of their health primarily. Because they are more of a heavier pigeon. They don't fly around as much. They don't get as much exercise as some of the other breeds, but you want to make sure that their diet's on is key. You give them regular baths and things like that. I usually try to bathe them 2-3 times a week when they're molting. That usually helps the feathers grow in correctly. And of course, taking care of the obvious stuff like the parasites and
Yeah.
doing all the preventative treatment. You got to do that, otherwise it doesn't matter what the breed is. If you do that, they're not going to be in good show condition for sure.
Okay. So, I mean, there's not really too much like breed specific. It's pretty across the board conditioning for those birds. What are the, if someone's looking to get into this breed, what are the biggest pros and cons? I mean, what are the difficulties of the breed and what's good about them?
Yeah, I'd say the pros are they're very docile. Like you look at them, they look like a very large pigeon, but they're not very aggressive. My utility kings actually beat
So
the
they're not
crap
like a
out of
Modena.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, they're not like Moldinas. They're not very aggressive. If you keep them on the ground, I mean, if you look at some of my videos of my utility loft where I have the kings, the runts are on the floor. They get along great, and they will nest there, and they're happy there. They won't go around and scalp and do and intrude on other nests and things like that. But for the most part, I do put them in individual pairs and individual pens because I want to be sure about the parentage. I would say the runts, you'll be we used to have a lot more members before. I think every breed could say that, as we further down the line, we start losing some of our older breeders and there's not enough younger breeders coming into it. But I think the guys that we have a great group of guys. We have a really good club. Right now, our president is Joe Benavides. Our outgoing president is Bill Fletcher, and our secretary is Paul Souza. Great group of guys based out of primarily New England and Canada. We do have quite a presence in the U.S. Midwest as well. But they're a challenging breed though because of their size. Their fertility is not as great as it would be in some of the smaller breeds. Some of these bigger cockbirds that are hovering over 3 pounds have a little trouble. So it is challenging to get the fertility numbers up. I think when you do produce good birds and you start showing and you enjoy the companionship of everyone that's in the club, you'll see that it's a breed that you definitely do want to be a part of. So the cons would be, of course, their size and their fertility, etc. But I think some of the pros are the club itself. Very challenging because
what's the average size on these?
Anywhere from 2.5, I would say, to 3.5 pounds. Although I've had some birds pushing closer to 4 pound mark.
Okay, so there's no 5-pounders.
No,
I'm just clearing something up. Just clearing something.
I don't think there's that. I think
that's
the
big.
biggest
That's a heavy bird right there.
That's a heavy bird. 5 pounds is huge. Yeah.
That's a rooster.
Yeah, that's a rooster.
Well, I mean, even 3 pounds. I mean, that's a big pigeon.
It is. 3 pounds is a big bird. I mean, I've got a couple of them that are being around the 3 pound range. I've had one that was pushing 4. It was a bird that my dad raised a few years, not too long ago, about 2017, and I weighed him on one of those food scales, and he was 3 pounds 15 ounces, which is an ounce less than 4 pounds. But
is that right before you ate him?
Yeah, no, oddly enough, I've never eaten a runt, but some people that enjoy eating pigeons always hit me up for some kings or some runts, calls, like some of the ones that don't have good.
Gordon Ramsay's going to call you now.
Right.
He is.
Well, that's their history, man. That's squab right there.
They are. Yeah, that's where they started. The Roman banquet pigeon.
Yeah, I was gonna just say that. I wondered when you mentioned that to me before. You're like, I can talk about the Roman banquet pigeon. I'm like, what is that? So yeah, that's interesting, man. They get really long history as being that role.
Oh yeah. And another thing too, the runt went into breeding for a lot of these other utility breeds, right? Like Moldinas. They went into a lot of the crossing that they did for kings and show kings. Yeah, the runt was used for a lot of other breeds and vice versa. Some of the other breeds were used to cross into the runt to improve some of the features. You look at something as simple as like the mondanes, right? The gross mondanes that they, if you will, that they have in Europe, right? They are a bird with a smaller head. And for whatever reason, everything that comes to America, we like to make them a little bit bigger and better head, better beak, better powerful. A different look, and the same went into the runt. Yeah, we like to take something that's got weak and that's weaker in some features and make it better. So, and then the same thing could be said for the runts as well. I have a lot of family overseas in Portugal that they still have the Romanian type of runts, right? The longer, slender type. And when they come visit, they come to Canada regularly. They look at my birds and say, wow, like ours don't even pale in comparison to the ones you got. Ours might be longer, and they're more horizontal. They don't stand on a nice 45-degree back angle like yours, and they're not as showy. That's one thing they always notice is like, wow, your birds, like, they look like they want to be looked at. Yeah.
Where does a guy find some giant runts at? Do you guys have a breeder directory or some back page?
And we have like the Facebook page as well. Primarily, most of the runts today are going to be in New England, in that area, Rhode Island, Massachusetts. You'll get quite a few breeders in the Midwest as well, in Iowa. There's quite a few friends of mine that are from there. A couple people in California and the West Coast, but primarily out east and in Canada is where the hotbed is for giant runts. But we do publish a breeder directory for runts. And there's a few guys that are N.P.A members as well, like Paul Souza, David Benavides, Bill Fletcher. There's quite a few other guys, quite a few of the members that are also N.P.A members.
Yeah, we always tell everybody the best place to buy any pigeons is at a show, at a club show, anything like that. Avoid these online deals. There's so many scammers right now.
Don't get me going on that.
Oh yeah, they're a lot of fun. Chris has a lot of fun with those guys. They'll post pictures of fantails and be like, check out my Birmingham rollers, and make it easy.
Yeah, I admin a couple of different sites for the runts, and I get reports pretty much at least a couple times a week. Yeah. Somebody's got a picture of somebody's bird that I know, and they're trying to sell it to somebody, and send me the money. And,
so don't fall for that, people. Just get them at a club show, some reputable person that you know, or somebody else has bought from that you know, and stay away from that online stuff.
Exactly, and even like tracking the band numbers, you'll be able to tell. Like, ask the person that you're buying them from, say what's the band numbers on the birds, and ask our secretary who bred them. He'll tell you who they belong to, if they're lying to you or not.
Yeah, that's a good way of doing it. Yeah, the band number, because if you got an N.P.A banded bird, you can call them right up, and if those names don't match up, that's a quick way to find out.
And for that reason, we encourage everyone in our club. Our club does provide N.P.A bands. We get them strictly right from the N.P.A, and we try to keep the same bands for a couple of reasons. Number one, for master breeder points, right?
Right.
You want to make sure that the person that's winning, or the birds that are winning, are actually bred by that person. But it's also good for tracking, right? For that reason. So if somebody says, well, this bird's band number is 422, then that's one of my band numbers, and they'll know, and they'll say, hey, man, this guy's selling one of your birds. Who the heck is this guy, right? But unfortunately, I think with scams, like one of the things I do for work, though, is cybersecurity too, right? So one of the things that people fall for all the time is they believe the people that are communicating with them, they'll post a picture of pigeons that don't belong to them, and they'll say, send me the money with very little validation other than a photo of the pigeon, and it's pretty hard to go by that. See, personally, I don't like to ship birds. I tell people all the time, I'd like you to see my birds either at a show like Louisville at the National Young Bird Show, or at the National, or up here in Canada at the CPFA Classic, or any of the other big shows. That's the best place to get pigeons, is live and in person. They
won't let me into Canada.
They won't?
He's blacklisted everywhere.
Is that right? Well, but any show, even in the U.S., right? If you go to a show and you see the people that are showing the birds, you get to interact with them. And I'm not saying that they're going to sell you their champion. That nobody does that, but they always bring a few birds for sale. Everybody that goes to Louisville every year always has a few extra birds. at the end of the season, or you make a relationship with that person. You start and you keep in contact with them, and then in a year or 6 months down the road, at another show that you might be at, that's the best place to get birds. You already know the person, you've met them, they're legit. Keep away from the online scammers, by all means, for sure.
We need to bring some of those giant runts down. We're part of the Arizona Pigeon Club. We're doing a swap and sell here in March. We got a member, right? Miguel. He's a member there. He's a good friend of ours. He's all about the giant runt. He has a tattoo of the Giant Runt 1980 standard on his arm. So bring some of your birds down to Arizona. Sell some giant runts at our show.
Yeah.
You gonna make it to the national show is it Oklahoma next year?
Yeah, I'm planning on going next year. I didn't go this year because my dad, he's 81. He had prostate surgery, and I had just taken on a new role at work, so it didn't work out for me this year. And then the previous show, COVID, right?
The Texas one got closed down.
Yeah, and it's hard to get birds across. I'm finding it's getting, and a lot of my Canadian colleagues will agree with me, it's getting harder and harder to get birds across the border. Before, it was a little bit simpler, where you could just do everything yourself. You go to your local vet. I got a fantastic vet over here. He does all my paperwork. Dr. Kirkham, shout out to him. I'll probably send him a copy of the podcast because he loves pigeons. He specializes in them. But he does my paperwork, and usually I call up the U.S. vet on the border, fax them a copy of my paperwork after I've gone to the CFIA office. But now with the avian bird flu, things are kind of a little wonky. Some of the border crossings want you to get a broker or get in contact with a broker in order to bring birds in. I think there's a couple of places still that you could cross, like Port Huron, etc., that you don't need to go through that hassle. But my hope is that with the avian influenza, and finally, if somebody finally gets it, that pigeons and chickens are not exactly the same.
Right.
That we can go back to the way it was before, where we could just work with the vets on the Canadian and U.S. side and just go right through. And hopefully that gets straightened out too, and that'll be a big difference too, and how many guys can go down south and show the pigeons.
Yeah, so if anybody's looking to get into this breed, definitely check out they have a Facebook group right there. And of course, there's the National Club for the Giant Runts also. You said you're the publicity director for that club?
Yeah, Giant Runt Club of America. If anybody wants to join the Giant Runt Club of America, be in contact with myself, Manny DeMedeiros, or Paulo Souza. He's our secretary. And basically we run a couple of bulletins a year. And we have regional shows. We've got 6 district shows. We have 2 regional shows. And we also are present at the National Young Bird Show in Louisville, Kentucky, as well as the N.P.A. Grand National. And also on the Canadian side, if there's anyone that's listening to this is on the Canadian side, we have a Canadian club that's affiliated with the U.S. club. We run a show here as well. We actually just had one a week ago. Just over a week ago. Yeah, we also show at the big Woodstock specialty show in Woodstock, Ontario. And if the CPFA Classic is in the vicinity, we usually are there as well.
Excellent. Well, hopefully Chris and I are going to be able to make it out to the big show in Oklahoma next year. That's our goal.
Yeah.
Get a table set up for the podcast and go out there for a few days. That'll be nice if we can do that and meet you out there. That'll be a good time.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah.
A lot of birds at those shows.
Yeah, there are. I mean, I judged Oklahoma in 2014.
Oh, okay.
And we had well over 100 runts there at that time.
Awesome.
And Oklahoma, the Pigeon Museum is there. And,
right.
Yeah, it's not a bad drive from Southern Ontario. I mean, from here to the Ozarks, as soon as it's funny, I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day about this. The ride like down to Amarillo, when we would go down to the Amarillo show, it seems long because you think about 24, 30 hours, but you're really, the bad weather is probably about 10 to 14 hours. After you pass the Ozarks, it's like going through the Pennsylvania Turnpike. You go in the tunnel one way and it's winter, and then you come out the other side, it's spring. For whatever reason, the mountains keep a lot of the bad weather north of there. It's a nice drive down, and down there to Route 66. And yeah, I like Oklahoma. I like anywhere in the South, actually.
That's a bit
Oklahoma, that's where the wind comes whipping through the plains.
oh man,
Oh yeah.
this old guy bringing out his show tunes right now. Okay, we're, we're up against the clock here. Manny, thanks for coming on, man. This is awesome. I really appreciate it. You definitely got a lot of good knowledge on these birds, and if anybody's ever interested in getting into them, this would be a good episode for them to check out.
Yeah, appreciate you guys, and great work with the podcast, guys. I've listened to all your episodes. I love them all. Love listening to Bob Nolan, and I love what you guys are doing to promote the hobby.
That's one of my favorite ones.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So,
Bob
same here.
was a lot of fun having him on there. We could talk to him about all kinds of different aspects. We just had to focus on conditioning with that one, but
he was great at that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate your time.
Yeah, thanks,
man.
man.
I appreciate you guys. Thank you. All the best.
You too.
And we'll see you guys on the road. Take care.
See ya.